Hello, all you positive heads out there. It's so good to be back with all you beautiful reflections of the one source consciousness that creates and animates all things. If you're new to this podcast, of course, we're super happy to have you here. And if you've been listening and enjoying for a while, I would be super grateful if you would please take a moment to give us a review on Apple Podcasts. It's one of the best and simplest ways to pay it forward and help others find the show so that they too can tap into the powerful perspectives and positive vibrations we are collectively emanating. The other unique and magical way to share this show is by sending any friends you think would benefit from listening to this podcast our Game with the Universe link at positivehead.com/game. Also listed in the show notes, which will serve them up a quote-unquote random episode when they click it. Just instruct them before clicking the link to close their eyes for a moment and sincerely ask the universe to cue up the episode that contains the insight and perspectives that they most need to hear at this point in their life journey, and then click to listen to whatever episode is synchronistically served up to them. I have heard time and time again from people about the incredible results they received playing the game. So just tell your friends magical results are guaranteed or their karma back. All right, all you positive heads. On this week's interview episode, I'm extremely excited to have Sandra Walter here with me on the show. Sandra is a wayshower and gatekeeper who is helping to facilitate the great shift in consciousness we're currently experiencing here on planet Earth by acting as an ascension guide. Hello there, Sandra. Welcome to the show.
Blessings, brother. It's an honor to be here.
It truly is wonderful to have you. Ever since, going back to last spring, I believe, our mutual friend, Matt Belair, who's been on the show and a great friend of mine, was like, Brandon, you got to have Sandra on the show. You know, multiple times we've had people that we kick each other's way that we really, really enjoy and appreciate. And you were definitely right there at the top of Matt's list. And, you know, you and I talked about this months and months ago. And here we are, and so excited to pick your brain and dig into some of the juicy stuff that you have to share. Just to start off, I always like to be very predictable and ask the same question. All my regular listeners know what's coming. I always start with the same question and I end with the same question. Creature of habit. So the question is, you're in an elevator. The woman next to you looks over, says, "What's your passion?" You got 10 floors to answer. What do you say?
Ooh, what a great question. I would say, blessings, sister. My passion is to fully engage with the brilliant and challenging journey of ascension and to inspire, motivate, and guide other willing hearts to consciously experience the transformative power of divine love. And if we had a few floors left after I was done with that, I would say ultimately transcending the lower reality experience and showing humanity what is possible with ascension.
I'm pretty sure even if you ran out of floors, the person wouldn't get out of the elevator until you were done. Whoa. Yeah. So that is a lovely passion. And let's dig in and let's talk about that, shall we? And maybe the best place to start is telling us a little bit about your background, your story. You know, who are you? Where'd you come from? And how did you end up with such a unique trajectory?
Yeah, and the trajectory, that's a term I love to use because our personal trajectory can change. You know, our personal timelines change as our journey unfolds. So when I was very young, I was having, typical psychic kid experiences. Beings are showing up in your room. You're having crazy lucid dreams. You're flying around the galaxy at night, things like that. But I didn't have anyone in my immediate family or friend circle that was having a similar experience. So like many children, you learn how to shut up. And I was raised Catholic, so there was a lot of control type consciousness around me. However, I always felt like I was in the know on this other realm. Like it was very clear and very real to me. So I always felt like I was kind of holding a secret. And then as I got older, the experiences expanded. I got a little more galactic. I started writing. Even as a teenager, I was like writing my own Bibles, and
Oh,
all
wow.
these different things were going on, and all these stories that I was actually remembering from ancient days, and I was just calling it like my personal Bible, starring all women, and all their
Wow.
names began with M. It was like this Melchizedek, divine feminine aspect that I was experiencing. However,
Wow.
I started exploring consciousness as a teen. And then when I got into my 20s and I was in college, I had a past life regression, just a few friends goofing around, and said, okay, I want to try it, and we went. Back then, it was like a classic past life regression. You go back 3 lifetimes, each one further and further back, further and further back, and the first two were somewhat irremarkable but very emotionally charged. And then the last one, you're like, okay, go way back, and you go way back. You look, step into this reality. I stepped out of my body, turned around, and looked at myself, and I was like, I'm an alien. I
Wow.
mean, clearly a galactic, and had the jumpsuit on, everything, with this
Wow.
silvery gold trim. But I was very clearly aware of it being myself. And then from that past, during that regression, part of that experience was, okay, now step back into your body, whatever form that is, turn around and look where you are. And I was on top of a mountain guiding all of these people dressed in white up this mountain. And it was a very beautiful, sacred space, flowing grass, blue skies, really lovely. And then the final question that you went into the regression with was, what you asked at the end. And my question was, I want to know God. I want to experience what God truly is. And I looked up from this mountain scene, and it was like all the dimensions just ripped wide open. And there was this overwhelming sensation of being everywhere at once in pure divine love. And it just flooded me. And I started
Wow.
weeping and came out of and this happened at 20 years old. So I carried this image of this other aspect of self, and this experience of what source really was, because there can be a lot of confusion if you're growing up Catholic and it doesn't feel right. You're like, I'm not so sure about this judgmental God thing.
Right.
And carrying that forward, then I started writing every day, and eventually it turned into, in 1999, literally January 1st, woke up and I was suddenly vibrantly clairaudient, claircognizant, and I was bringing in messages every day, and I just diligently wrote them down, shared them with friends, didn't know what was going on, and then they turned into these lengthier kind of downloads about, as I was reconnecting with my divine aspects, with my multidimensional self, higher self, Christ itself, I am presence, whatever you want to call it. Suddenly my divine entourage had shown up and was like, look, this is what your trajectory is about. This is what we're doing. This is what's going on in the universe. And I diligently started writing about that, and exclusively wrote about creative consciousness. And then it morphed into writing exclusively about ascension. And in 2010, I just went for it, and they were like, look, you're an ascension guide, and you need to step fully into that in order for your highest trajectory, your highest outcome for this incarnation is to actually transcend and show the way out of these lower realities. And you're going to have to fully embrace the role of ascension guide. And then in 2012, I created this class called Ascension Path, and the tribe has built around that. So while my experience tends to be a little more galactic as a conduit, I've learned through all this training and this multidimensional training how to take that complex information, which is
Mm-hmm.
received, used to be words, but now it's more like these giant formless flashes of light and information, and then you meditate on it, and these light packets of intel get explained in linear ways through this kind of unpacking the download. And
Wow.
I've just been guided to teach, share, guide, and understand too that this was not a process that people had to go through alone any longer. I mean, yes, we all have to do the internal work, but there's plenty of tools and methods and sharing and information right now that's accelerating the process. So it's
Mm-hmm.
this divine reflection of the unification effects of crystalline or Christed or unity consciousness, however you term it, it's all the same thing. But this
Mm-hmm.
collective field is interconnecting all consciousness focused on love and light and ascension and unity in a faster and clearer way. So as we kind of move into unity consciousness, the whole process accelerates for everyone by quantum effect. Does that make sense?
Wow, that's all very, very fascinating, Sandra. So let me ask you, when you a couple things I want to talk about that we've already touched on is this idea of a gatekeeper and what that actually entails. And then I want to switch and from there, I'd like to hear sort of what your explanation of ascension is.
Absolutely. Well, gatekeeping is something that presented kind of mid 2000s. I didn't really understand why I was guided to do the things that I was doing, but I was just following the heart and had absolute faith in the process, kind of showing me what was going on. But then what's typical for most gatekeepers, and a gatekeeper is someone who is able to open and interact with multidimensional portals, gateways, stargates, within the planetary consciousness, within the collective consciousness, within the solar consciousness, galactic consciousness, and universal consciousness. So, depending on your trajectory, you can get trained to by multidimensional beings, not anybody in form, to open these gateways, and it assists the higher light to step in to the planetary consciousness and to step forth from the planetary consciousness. So gateways will have different functions. But as a gatekeeper, you typically have a gatekeeper initiation. And for me, I was doing, portal and Stargate and gatekeeper work. And then when I got reassigned to Mount Shasta, typical gatekeeper grid workers, we tend to travel a lot. We're always going to sacred sites in different places and clearing energies. And for a while, it was the ley line system. And then we started working on this new Earth grid system, which is just about 19 degrees off of the ley line system, because it's kind of like the direction of New Earth. But we were traveling, to all these different places and doing all this clearing and activation and everything. And I was literally in New York and moved cross country to Mount Shasta. And this is where the kind
Beautiful
of
spot.
height, and, oh goodness, it's so gorgeous. And
yeah, I've heard a lot of people talk about I've never been, but I say beautiful site because I've just heard so much feedback about it. And everyone who ever goes there, one of my very close friends, Tyler, recently moved there, and he just, everyone just talks about how special it is and the energy there, and it sort of being I guess kind of like one of the, I guess a portal in itself, right? Would you say that?
Yeah, it is a major, if not the major, gateway of these new Earth pathways, of this new Earth grid system. So even though it's connected to the classic ley line grid system, it didn't have as much distortion as some of the other sacred sites because it's so remote. It was 14,000 feet in Northern California, almost to Oregon, just in case people are wondering where it is. But it's extremely remote. The weather is intense for most of the year just because you're up in the mountains at elevation. So it's not the easiest place to be, but it's breathtaking. And the energies, and especially because of the work that everyone's been doing, light workers, gatekeepers, grid workers will come through here all year long. So it's
Wow.
consistently being amplified and visited and honored. And now it's deeply connected to this new Earth grid system. But when I came here in May of 2012, it was much different than it is now. So there's been a significant amount of work, but I had this gatekeeper initiation where suddenly, just in meditation, out of nowhere, there's giant golden gates and all this light, and the gates are opening, and there's your harmonics, and there's rows and rows and rows and legions of light and masters and angelic realms and lords of light. And
Wow.
it just floored me. I mean, I was weeping through the whole thing because it was so overwhelming. And
Wow.
the gates fly open. I do have that Catholic upbringing, so I'm like, oh my God, I'm going to heaven,
Right. This definitely
like,
is
oh,
heaven
this
if
is
it's
it,
anything.
it's 2012, here I go, and
Yeah.
so I'm walking through. There's these emissaries of light that are, escorting me through these gateways, and everyone's bowing, and they're like, welcome, dear gatekeeper. And I'm like, gatekeeper, this is the first time
Yeah.
that anyone from the higher realms had used that term directly. And they were like, this is why you're here. This is your path. This is your highest trajectory. So from then on, everything started getting focused on these gateways. And we had this unification within what I call the light tribe, within the light workers that were continually doing this grid work and this gatekeeping, this light work around the planet. And suddenly there was this call to unify all of us during these certain passages when the sun, the sun in the sky, Solaris, would be sending light our way, when galactic energies were going to be coming in. And then next thing 2013 all the way up until the present, they've been consistently saying, they'll lay it out. My team will lay it out for the whole year. And it's
Wow.
still a bit of a mystery to me how they know that 7 M flares are going to go off if I show up in a certain place on Mount Shasta on, May 21st, that kind of thing.
Wow.
It's still a bit of a mystery to me. I'm like, okay, so I put my hands up and that happens. Okay. It's something that there's a not a veil there, but there's part of me that's like, I'm just not going to think about that. I'm just,
Right.
okay, just trust
Right.
it. Just trust it, because they've always
Right.
shown me, if we all focus, this is going to happen, and then it becomes, there was solar gatekeeper ship that started showing up in 2013, where I was interacting with presences that are working with the sun and within the sun itself. And then it became these kind of cosmic stargates where it was energies that were flowing into the galaxy. And there's all this going on with this gatekeeper ship. And to me, it's an extremely beautiful and very humbling responsibility, because it does take responsible creation. You have to be in that humble, heart-centered, absolutely present with exactly what's happening, and get your mind out of the way, get your emotions out of the way, and just follow the guidance and let source direct that process. It is a complete surrender to divine will so that the proper things can happen in the right order, the right energies, all of that. But there's been this beautiful
Wow.
unification of gatekeepers and grid workers because we never used to talk about it. There used to be a lot of interference, and now that that's dissolving, we're able to get together and go, you know what, if we all focus, here's the gate dates, here's where we're going to focus here. I mean, it just happened again this week, just yesterday, part of a gateway passage, and we have all this geomagnetic activity and the storms and the energies. And it's been this series of these sequential events that are leading up to a solar event, a shift in consciousness, rather than focusing on the physical, when is the sun going to go off? We focus on the shift in consciousness itself, a different level or layer of consciousness being revealed. That's what the revelation is all about. It's about revealing this profound source as self realization, which is my definition of ascension. It's this conscious choice to engage in evolution, both personal and collective, to experience that profound source as self-realization. Self-realization is the realization that there is complete oneness and infinite intelligence in all of creation. But to free the heart and the mind and the body and the spirit from all of the lower constructs, realities, densities, in order to purify, divinitize, and ultimately transform the collective consciousness. And what we do here, even though we have personal goals, my personal goals demonstrate what Christ, crystal, and unity consciousness is and what that state is capable of in human form, comprehending that the creative expression of uniqueness is key to overcoming and healing fears and distortions. But the ultimate goal is that becoming a pure conduit of the true self, the multidimensional self, which at the highest of levels is source itself, and at the lowest of levels is our personal experience. So it's merging all of this merging of different levels of consciousness. And to me, that is the Christ consciousness, to be fully aware of the multidimensional self and still be able to operate in all those different dimensional and denser realms. You're bringing heaven to earth in order to transform her. Does that make sense?
Right. Oh, absolutely. Yeah, it's a fascinating explanation of the process. And yeah, for me, I always relate to it as thinking of source sort of has separated an experience. We've experienced lots of separation as a collective, and that sort of plays itself out to the fullest. And it's like, okay, the bell has rung. It's time to sort of start merging back together. And as we all come back together, remembering our divine birthright and who and what we truly are. And it becomes sort of the only thing or certainly the primary thing to focus on once you become aware. Everything is an extension of self, and we're at a point where we're ready to sort of ramp up. This quickening, if you will, seems to be happening. And certainly I'd be curious if you feel, as someone who is, relates as a gatekeeper and an ascension guide, do you feel there is sort of this quickening happening where things are getting faster and faster and people are sort of coming online and awakening, if you will, at a ever increasing rate?
Absolutely. And that rolls into the concept, or the experience, I should say, of embodiment. So there's been a lot of talk about embodiment of the Christ consciousness, and that is why there is this acceleration. Yes, there are cosmic factors in the area of space that we're going into that has these more intense photonic light particles that do things to consciousness. However, to incarnate, regardless of what star system or what realm your source point is, your original creation point is from, to incarnate into the human genome. Human means God, man. Hu means God, source, man. The human genome contains all the codes for reconnecting with pure source consciousness. It's very unique. And that's why we talk about, 12-strand DNA and 13, 14, 144, 244, all of those different strands of DNA are part of that divine human genome. It holds the encodements for having a direct experience of source in what can be a rather dense reality. So as we heal these wounds of separation and dissolve the old paradigm of grief and suffering as part of the human condition, the new truth is this revelation of unity, divinity, compassion, infinite consciousness. And this experience of embodiment is it's outstanding, and it's also difficult to describe. But as we reunify the multidimensional self, the fractal of the larger operation, we're reconnecting all the fractals of source, which is why time dynamics don't work the way that they used to. We've been told for a while in the light tribe that embodiment changes everything. So as we merge with our higher aspects, higher selves, we embody those frequencies and those states of crystalline consciousness, and then you become this conduit of that pure love light frequency. And that in turn greatly affects the grid systems, the collective consciousness upon Gaia. And this purpose of embodiment is to bring that vibration into its fullness, into this blossoming stage where it actually collapses time dynamics. So you start experiencing past, present, and future not as separate things, but as simultaneous. And even though it's thrown around a lot as a catchphrase, the now, this absolute presence is true source power, and not power over, but it's service. Service
Right.
changes everything. Eventually everyone will get to the point who has a willing and open heart where you just surrender completely to service and you're like, nothing matters but service. You will get there. That is the start of Christ consciousness. You want to give everything away. You want to help everybody. You want to be.
If you want to find yourself, lose yourself in service is the ultimate. One of my favorite quotes. It's it really is true.
It truly is. So time dynamics start to get very bizarre. You'll feel your past lives just kind of wash away. Future self starts showing up, and all of a sudden you've got this blend of past, present, and future. And while you're still able to make out, okay, that's something that I need to prepare for, it's going to happen in the quote unquote future, or past will come up and you'll be like, I'm done with that. After you do all this significant amount of clearing and work on yourself, you're able to be in that now. And that collective now, that collective presence that's happening right now is what is allowing for that collapse of time dynamics, the collapse of, the bifurcation of timelines that we've been talking about. It's because of this collective awakening. The collective awakening is the grounded side effect of higher light coming onto the planet, higher consciousness, and the urgency or impulse to want to know the truth is this widespread phenomenon. The awakening phenomenon is widespread. And while that is happening, and the reason why it's stepping up right now is not just because of these external cosmic factors, but because the high vibe tribes experience, those who are absolutely dedicated to the ascension and the return of this Christed consciousness, the absolute dedication of I will spend this entire life stream and more if necessary, making sure that this ascension occurs, for as many willing hearts as possible. So in the high vibe tribes experience, our experience is one of merging with the Godhead to transform these realities into divine order and pure love light, to express the grace of infinite intelligence. And when you have a consciousness that's merging with other fractals of the same with the same intention, that's why the acceleration is becoming so palpable. It's this divine dance between the cosmic order, the cosmic divine order coming down through the realities and penetrating the planet, as well as this pure intention activating within the high vibe tribe. And we're saying yes, and this year in particular, with this embodiment that's been going on, has been getting a little off the charts. High vibe tribe is having some way out experiences. Right? Back in May, not just with the timeline drop off and the bifurcation, but we're actually getting exposed to formless realms, interacting with these formless realms. Once you get past a 9D kind of existence, you leave form altogether. And when you're able to interact with those higher aspects or higher realms, like a more pure, like Elohim type level, you're bringing in some very high vibrational light into the collective consciousness when you dedicate yourself to interacting with those realms, and you can feel it activating the crystalline DNA within you, and then you're feeding it out through these grid systems that have been created and the collective human heart grid, so that the acceleration and the amplification is available to any willing heart willing to tap into that. And that's the purpose of we have Sunday global unity meditations that have been going on for 19 months now. Every Sunday, 3 times on Sunday, totally dedicated to unity meditations. And that's when we feed all these codes and light and intentions for this higher reality into the grid systems, Gaia's core, the collective human heart grid. It's a lot of dedication, but it's because this is a brilliant passage to be on this planetary consciousness. It's also very challenging as the division between the realities widens, because we can have this conversation, and I assure you there are, neighbors even right here in Shasta who will be like, what are you, they can't even hear us,
Right.
No idea what you're talking about, so that's what we talk when we talk about bifurcation of timelines. It used to be metaphoric, where you were having a different experience and the person next to you is like, not so much. Well, it's starting to get physical, and especially with the high vibe tribe. I mean, I've had some pretty wild experiences of invisibility. People like walked right through my lap when I was meditating in Sedona. I'm like, how is that possible? Are we not sharing a reality any longer, where you're vibing in and out of each other's parameters for truth? Technically that's all a reality is like somebody's personal or collective parameters for the truth.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And they're forming these little pockets
those
of different truths. And as a result, it's sort of going into different experiences and different, maybe in the same physical space, apparently, but that starts to get fuzzier and fuzzier. Certainly, if someone's walking through your lap, it's getting fuzzier. I mean, what a wild experience. So you were tell us that story. I love any kind of good stories. So I'd be curious to hear what was going on there and what happened with you.
Well, that was a few years ago. It's been getting more and more intense as this journey unfolds, and especially someplace like in Mount Shasta, where it's very multidimensional here. There's a lot of interdimensional stuff going on where, the stories would be endless. But just as an example, on the eclipse, August eclipse, big gateway. I'm up at Southgate Meadow. It's about an hour hike from the highest place where you can park, so I'm up at dawn hiking, get up there, open up the gateways. There's a very strong gateway portal, at the uppermost part of Southgate Meadow. And I was guided to be there for the eclipse peak itself. And I thought, well, this is fantastic. I've got a great view, I go up there, and and oddly enough, I had 40 pounds of crystal on my back. I had all the gate crystals with me and everything. So I'm hiking with this heavy pack, and I get to a place where I have to cross a stream, and my foot slipped, and I just plunged into this stream. But I threw my backpack up on the side and crawled up, almost, within just a few seconds of plunging into the water. But needless to say, my linen whites were soaked all the way to the skin. But there's nobody up there. So I take off my clothes and I hang them on the trees, and I have a scarf, so I'm like, okay, I'll just throw this big gold scarf around me. And I'm up there, and I set up my crystals, and it's eclipse time. I'm up there through the whole eclipse, a good 2 hours afterward, doing gate work and anchoring the frequencies and the timeline splits and everything that's going on. And I put back on my dry clothes, and I hike down. And over the course of the next couple days, I run into people who are like, "Oh yeah, we were there too."
Wow.
In the same place. I did not see them. They did not see me. We were in the same place. They know where the gateway is. I know where the
Right.
gateway is, but I hiked up there alone. I didn't see anybody. There was no, I mean, so it's like this weird vibrational mismatch can occur. And
Hmm.
people have seen me all over the mountain when I am not there. So this
Wow.
DNA, you know how your DNA leaves a light signature for 30 days anywhere that
Right.
you've
Right. Yeah.
been?
Yeah. Hmm.
Yeah, so it's that thing. As your DNA gets stronger and the crystalline DNA gets stronger, you're able to leave that impression and kind of bilocate with your multidimensional self to all these different places within that 30-day window. Sometimes it gets a little longer. But I've had people saying, I saw you meditating and I didn't want to disturb you, but, we just kind of tiptoed by. And I know I wasn't there. I was in town when they're at the same time they're talking
Wow.
about. So there's all these things going on for the kind of vibrational weirdness. And the other thing is in Shasta, I've seen all kinds of different beings and different light ships coming and going out of the mountain and in and out of the walls of my tent. I camp for extended periods of time on the mountain by myself in order to have that experience. So there's been a lot of interdimensional activity. But as recently as just a week ago, I have kind of a guardian Sasquatch by my campsite,
Oh,
went to
wow.
visit my campsite, and he revealed for a good 200 feet running around the area of my campsite. And he has not done that before. So all of this
Wow.
lifting of the veils thing is intensifying. So I used to see him, 10 feet at a time. And for him to reveal that strongly for that long, I'm like, something's going on.
I really
So
want to connect you with my friend who just moved to Shasta,
sure.
because him and I actually started a Burning Man camp together about 5 years ago, and it's really his brainchild. And I helped him get it going, but it was sort of and he's still very active in running it, Intergalactic Sasquatch Village. So, and he just moved up there, and very within the last few months, and so as soon as you start talking about that, I'm like, oh gosh, I got to introduce you to Tyler. So what a trip.
Yeah. And this is Squatch territory up here, Northern California up into Oregon, because of all the trees. They're very connected with trees, and that's what
Do
they
you
use
believe they're
for
multidimensional
portaling it
beings?
out.
So they're essentially, when people say, okay, where's the bodies or these sorts of things, you're seeing them, but maybe, the average Joe would not see him or her, because it's sort of a, they're vibrating at a different frequency. It's like another realm that you're able to perceive, and someone else is not. And of course, all these stories and things we hear about them without a whole lot of physical evidence is because they're being seen on another plane of existence, if you will.
Yeah, in my experience, it's up to them.
Mm.
I can ask, are you around? And I'll get the flash in, flash out, or, the rock knocking right next to my head or whatever,
Right.
kind of like, we're here, or he'll put off a smell or whatever. And I know people have had, some malevolent experiences with those beings, but I'm just talking about my personal Sasquatch tribe
Right.
they have acted like guardians. I mean, they have chased people away. They have thrown down trees when things are getting too weird. I mean, they do take care of me, and they respond in a pure telepathic way.
Wow.
So I don't need, at first I was speaking out loud, but once I learned how strong their telepathic communication is and their ability to fade in and out of this reality, they're very good at that. They appear only when they want to appear.
Wow.
So I'm extremely honored. The first time I saw them, there was somebody pulled in too close to my campsite, too late at night, blaring music. It's a sacred space. I'm a woman alone. It was just too weird.
Yeah.
And I looked at that, and I was just kind of squatting over my campfire ring. And I looked up and I was like, oh, that will not do. And that was the first time that I saw him, my Sasquatch, appeared between two trees that were about 10 feet away from each other. And he was just beelining toward that car. And I was like, whoa, that brother's on a mission. I was like, oh my gosh, I just saw a Sasquatch, But a few seconds later, the man got back in his car and tore out of the campsite and rushed down the mountain. And I was like, are you taking care of me? I was
All
like,
right.
thank you.
Wow.
And he appeared and bowed, and he was like, anything for you, gatekeeper. And I was
Wow.
like, wow, this guy has
Whoa.
been watching my ceremonies and everything that I've been doing, and he knows what I'm doing. So all of a sudden I had, a guardian. It was
Wow.
fantastic. So,
Incredible.
yeah, it's interesting, but in my experience, it's up to them whether they reveal. They're very good at stepping in and out of our reality, and whether that's increasing their vibration or lowering it, I don't know.
Yeah. Right.
But they've been very good to me.
Before we continue on with today's episode, for those of you interested in getting more fantastic fungi in your life, I want to take a quick moment to tell you about a friend of mine's brand new company, The Great Mother. Recently, I have been drinking The Great Mother's superfood mushroom coffee alternative called Ritual, as well as regularly taking their awesome Ally microdoses, and I am truly loving both. As you probably know, these days, many of the world's highest achievers and performers swear by microdosing. The problem is it can still be difficult to get a hold of magic mushrooms. That's why when my friend reached out, who lives in an area and country where legalization is not a problem like it was in the past, and said he'd be willing to offer microdoses to my listeners, I wanted to pass the word along. Ally microdoses are 100% organic. And in addition to a small amount of the magic active ingredient, they also contain functional mushrooms like lion's mane, cordyceps, chaga, and other brain boosters like bacopa. Ally is essentially a full spectrum nootropic. And of course, the coffee alternative Ritual doesn't contain magic mushrooms, but it has an array of the best organic functional mushrooms in the world. And, with functional mushrooms, it's really important to get them from the highest integrity sources. And whereas some other highly popular mushroom coffee alternatives on the market only contain a few varieties of functional mushrooms in their actual ingredients, Ritual has 7. Not only does it contain more types, it also contains 3 to 4 times the amount that the big brands have in each serving. And it tastes amazing. I actually like to have it on its own, as well as mixing it into my coffee sometimes as well. However, since this is definitely a unique offering, there are a few steps. First, just reach out and request to follow the private page, thegreat.mother on Instagram. Once you've been accepted to follow, just message what you're interested in getting and someone will get back to you. Wow. Now, you said you've also seen lots of light ships as well. Have you had experiences directly with any ships or extraterrestrial entities, maybe in a meditative state or even in a physical state?
Would it bother you if I said that was a consistent part of my experience?
It would excite me. I don't know if it'd bother me.
It's, yes, that is a consistent part of my experience every time I go on the mountain and hold up my right hand. I have light encodements in my light signature. Your light signature is projected through your right hand. Mm-hmm. So if you want to have interaction with, which is technically higher aspects of yourself, there's a bit of a misunderstanding that the light ships are like separate from us, but it's actually, that revelation came to me early in 2012 because I had seen light ships before, but it was much more present and consistent on Mount Shasta. And of course, interaction typically occurs, even though it's occurred with other people, typically the very intimate interaction comes when you're alone. That's just the way it is for now. But the first time, there was one that came in very close right over my campsite. I was having this beautiful conversation with Source and my higher self about the nature of reality. So I was in the zone. If you're in the zone of contemplating collective source consciousness and things like that, it puts you automatically in the zone to receive interaction with higher level consciousness. So I was already in that zone, and the light ship came in very close, just above tree level, shined a beam down on me. And I looked from side to side. I was like, is this just for me?
Right.
What's going on here? I looked around. I'm like, yeah, that's just my campsite. Okay. And I looked up and I felt this overwhelming intuition of what were we just talking about? And I was talking about this I was thinking, contemplating, talking with Source about how the collective consciousness, how multidimensional consciousness worked. And I looked up at the ship again, who was now sailing away from my circle of trees. And I went, oh my goodness, are you me? And it beamed back at me again and then floated away. And in that moment, there was like this huge cosmic download of like what multidimensional was, what this merging of consciousness was, that all those lucid experiences of being on the light ships, of flying in and out of the mountain and other structures. And even as a child, I thought I was going to be an astronaut because I was like, oh, I'm in the white jumpsuit every night, flying around the galaxy and flying around the planet, and I thought I was dreaming of being an astronaut, or that I was going to be an astronaut when I was a kid. And then, now the experience is quite lucid, and I've had those experiences of the light ships coming and landing right near my campsite. And again, when I'm completely alone, there's nobody else around.
Wow.
And that light ship will come and land, and then there'll be like this swirling blue silvery light will come and kind of penetrate, and the whole side of my tent just disappears, and all of a sudden there's interaction. And
wow.
It's been
so you'll see not only the ship, but you'll see entity that you are interacting with?
Sometimes there are beings. A lot of times it's just consciousness. It's difficult to describe, but it's like
not as physical as you and I maybe sitting down over a cup of coffee in the way we're used to interacting with another being.
Yeah, I've never seen a metallic light ship ever. I'm not one of those people who's even seen. I haven't even seen the cigar-shaped things. I've never seen a metallic. It's always just pure light.
Gotcha.
And the interaction has been either purely telepathic, where there's a presence, either that or something happens with my pineal, that it's all just like this streaming light. And usually in my visions, I can see other beings, but for some reason with the light ship level, if it actually lands or flows in, they go in and out of the ground. There's no density there whatsoever. They're just in and out. There's no like door opening with like being stepping off a platform. Never had that experience.
Gotcha.
But I have had the experience of being showing up in my campsite or in my presence, or there's these beings on that visit Shasta who walk and their feet don't hit the ground, and yet there's footsteps. So I'll be doing gate work and all of a sudden crunch, 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 crunch. And I'm like, oh, welcome. And if I close my eyes, I can see this, the large kind of glowing being, sometimes in jumpsuity things, sometimes just in flowing white robes. It depends on who they are, but they always kind of give me the heads up with the footsteps, but they're not actually standing on the ground. There's all these different expressions of consciousness.
Right.
And again, giving yourself the opportunity to teach yourself how to face those fears.
That was my next question. That was, you took the question right out of my head. Like, how does someone deal with the fears that come up as we sort of start playing in these realms? I know myself, have had some really fascinating experiences. And a lot of times with me, it's been through using a plant medicine or psychedelic or something. Just having some incredible experiences. And then, all of a sudden the fear will come in, and so curious on how you have dealt with that.
Yeah, and this is something that I wanted to mention too. Even though my visions can be quite psychedelic, the gatekeeper thing, you're seeing like flying Sri yantras and tubes and light and all that stuff. I have never engaged with plant medicine or psychedelics or anything like that. I smoked pot a couple times when I was in, college. Right.
It doesn't sound like you need to ever. So
I was always a little like, I don't know. And my guides were always like, show them that you don't have to do that.
Right.
Show them
Right.
that you can have that clear, direct experience of a wide open pineal without, burning holes in your calcified glands. You don't have to do that. And I'm testament to that. The things that I see in these golden crystalline diamond realms and the crystalline cities over Shasta that have been taken up to, and even just laying in meditation, a couple of equinoxes ago, I just laid on the ground. I was exhausted from gate work. And all of a sudden you're just taken out of your body. You're on light ship level, shown a vision and thrown back in your body. These experiences come without the medicine. So just to be clear, that is possible.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. And of course, pretty much everyone who's had any sort of experience seems to either know that intuitively, or it's kind of accepted across the board. It's one way to access, and I think for a lot of people who weren't born as a child having the types of experiences you've had, it's a great gateway in a sense for people who then move beyond it. It's like Terrence McKenna talked about, psychedelics. He's like, look, once you've received the message, hang up the phone. Right. So, they can really help, I think, a lot of people. But then, someone like yourself who's just can't even help but have these experiences, and right out of the gate, you're having these experiences. It almost seems redundant and, like it would work in the opposite way for you, right?
Well, it takes dedication. It's not something that just got turned on. I just said, and now my pineal shall open. Right. It didn't happen that way. Right. It's meditation, it's cleansing, it's clearing. All the things that we go through in Ascension Path are all, the steps that we take in order to open that up. And also the understanding is that the visions make absolutely no sense unless the heart is connected and turned on.
Right.
You can look at other realms and have, I am someone, I have listened to, Brother Terrence's material, and got a nice contact high from listening to Terrence McKenna. But the experience of being able to show up and at will blend with those realms and be able to direct it. That's the other thing when, because, star seeds, those of us who are here on, let's say, on mission or in service, we're all awakening right now. Mm-hmm. Star seeds are planted where the weeds grow the densest, where the untended undergrowth. It's
like the lighthouse is not put where there's light. It's in the darkness, right?
Yeah, you go right into where all the undergrowth choked the divine tendrils, in the garden and blocked the pure light in the garden. So you're engaging with this galactic legacy of this ascension process on a higher level. But when you dedicate yourself to opening your heart and blasting the mud off your diamond, the diamond heart center, everything, your skills, your intuition, your visions, and everything will clarify. And so much of that is facing fears. And if I have the opportunity to face a fear, I will go into it. And that includes being alone on the dark on a multidimensional mountain where a lot of weird stuff has gone down, and saying, I'll be here. I'm just going to stay a little bit longer. I'm just going to push through that. I'm not sure what's rustling over there in the bushes. What are those footsteps about? Because I could, if I wanted to choose a lower trajectory, walk away from it. I don't have a Christ complex. The messianic impulse came and went with me. It just, I was... I was like, well, what is this Christ consciousness thing really about? Because I was somebody who was coming to the breakfast table at, 5-6 years old going, I had a dream and Jesus was there and telling me all these beautiful things, wow. I had a very strong experience of Yeshua early on, so and that too comes and goes, yep. It's like when you need the direction it shows up, but facing fears and it can be the simplest of things. We train ourselves through this. What am I afraid of? Am I afraid of, for some people, speaking up, speaking my truth, facing an emotion, clearing an emotion. Goodness, an emotional clearing process is probably one of the most revelatory things that somebody can do to enhance their life stream, let alone their ascension process. And people will put it off for decades, clearing experiences from childhood or other incarnations or whatever, when it takes like a week to clear everything that happened in your childhood, but it's the fear of what will I be after that? They identify so much with fears or old self. These are fears that as we progress to the ascension process, even high vibe tribe is facing fear of ascension. The unknown, undefined territory of the new brings up fears of the nonlinear. What is it? What's it going to be like? Fear, the betrayal and worthiness and self-confidence things come up. Fear of the self as God.
Right.
Goodness, that's huge for some people. It's like, well, if I'm source, then what am I doing? What am I creating? Then all of a sudden you have to be responsible, a responsible creator. And that's something that a lot of the starseeds are hitting that right now, going to go fully into being a responsible creator and having the cosmic perspective of patience. This cosmic patience is a big thing because we're getting away from the when's it going to happen, why is it going to happen, and everything, and just going fully into the how. How do we create it? How do we unify? We're taking our power back. And especially as you start to experience the past, present, future merge, nonlinear time can baffle the brain until the neurons rewire and the brain works as a whole unit rather than dualistic halves. And the easiest way to bypass the confusion of this passage where nonlinear is starting to present very strongly is to just focus on the heart center until the heart and the mind can work in harmony. So that's always, we say love is the answer, but it's the absolute truth, highest truth.
So would you say dealing with all of this stuff, and, really you're still talking about fears in a sense, right? And if someone is facing moments of fears coming up, to sort of the best thing that they can do is really be brave and move into the heart. Say, okay, I'm not going to run from this, and I'm going to move into the heart and move into faith and trust as fully and be as present as I can, and sort of work through this energetic blockage that is surfacing.
Correct. And taking, the first step is to take full responsibility for your own journey.
Right.
And that's the first thing. Do I want to change? That's a first step in the ascension process too. Do I want to do this? Right. Because ascension is not easy. We're making it easier for those who come after us, but it's really making that internal choice of like, am I ready to get over this? Am I ready to face this fear? Because if it comes back as like, no, not now, your heart's not going to be in it. But if your heart is in it, like, I really would like to have a different experience. And you can, you kind of search the little internal catalog of, I have proof that I am more than what I am. I'm pretty sure that I have this intuition that there's something else going on the planet, that there's some better version of me out there, or a higher, more loving, more open version of me, if I could transmute this fear. Right. Because I know that I'm sick of it. If you feel like you're just sick of it, tired of it, you have to be completely responsible for your own self. So you start with the evidence of, what is this fear doing to me? And do I want to deal with that anymore? And if the answer is no, then you can move to the next step of like, okay, I'm going to take micro movements and start doing the self-examination, again, taking full responsibility for your own journey, and go, okay, what are some micro movements that I can prove, maybe slowly, maybe through bold steps, maybe through little micro movements, that I can get through this thing. You start whittling away at it. And when you start proving, you start changing your path, you start changing your trajectory. Well, I'm because the complementary exercise is to start mixing up your day, mixing up your activities, not doing this, repeating the same pattern, so that you're not in this holding pattern of a timeline loop. People get into repetitive behavior. So you start changing your physical thing a little bit. You start whittling away at the fear. Well, what am I really afraid of? Whittling it down, because the fear, any blockages to experiencing pure love is all, it's just fears, so you go, okay, where does you go back to the root cause of the fear and realize that everything that you have pulled into your reality is based on agreement. You're surrounded by masters. You cannot blame a parent or a childhood friend or a situation or whatever. You invited that in as a contract to teach you a lesson of love. It always has to do with facing a fear and getting to love, self-confidence, speaking your truth, getting a higher knowledge, whatever it is. But you go back and go, okay, all of these people in my life stream by pre-agreement have agreed to create that with me. Who wants to play the overbearing father, and you get a master who goes, oh yeah, I played your dad before, I'll play it again, I'll step in, and you're like, okay, really let me have it. So that I have to speak my truth. I want to learn this. I want to learn self-confidence. Come in, be the overbearing dad. Okay, great. Who wants to be the mousy mom who doesn't do anything? Okay, great.
I'm feeling mousy.
Then I will learn how to be a strong. Then I'll learn how to be a stronger woman. Okay, because you always set up the opposites of what your intention is. So you're shown, and if you didn't learn it with the parents or the family monad, then you've got all these people with the deli tickets in line going, well, if you didn't learn with that, I'll show up at this certain point, show you the same lesson. And they keep coming back. And once you identify the pattern, then it's easy. Then you're like, okay, do I want to clear this? Am I done with this contract? Do I want to learn self-confidence, self-expression, divine love? And you move into that, and you start forgiving and ending all those contracts. And forgiveness leads to gratitude. Hoorah, I learned the lesson. And the gratitude and the forgiveness will be so overwhelming when you realize that you are enamored by the illusion of your own pre-agreements, by your own setup. You'll feel that that's such a freeing experience to go, oh, I'm going to do it. I'm going to learn this. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for showing me exactly what I wanted to learn and exactly what I wanted to transmute in this incarnation. And it leads to forgiveness of everybody, gratitude, and then you express it. And then suddenly your heart is open, and suddenly you're moving through, you're moving on to the next fear, because fears have a way of trickling into other areas. They're kind of like neurons, they kind of fire into other areas. And once you get the core fears tackled, and you transition all of that into forgiveness and gratitude, it starts affecting everything, and the fears will just fall away. And they'll come up, little things will pop up as a test. It is mastery. We're on mastery journeys. So little things will pop up as a test. Are you sure you're done with that? I don't know. Girlfriend number 60, 70 is going to show up and try to teach you the same thing, that kind of thing. And then you're like, aha, and then you have these aha moments of like, I see exactly what that is. Okay, so I'm either not done with it, or I haven't really gotten to forgiveness, or I faked it when I was clearing.
I need to sharpen my axe a little bit more.
Yeah. And then it gets into, once you've done that base emotional clearing of family monad stuff and the basic soul lessons, the soul always has like probably 3 main intentions of like, well, if I can just get through self-confidence and, and self-realization and those things, different fears, then the soul can move on to other things, and you can really, then you start to play with it. Then you're sitting alone on a mountain with light ships coming and going, and you're going, okay, I can take this,
Right.
Well, the other thing is, I've also had a near-death experience.
Wow.
So that too can kind of launch you into I was walking around after that like, I'm immortal.
Wow.
I cannot be killed.
Wow.
You're like, okay, got a good glimpse of the other side, and it's amazing. I'm like, wow, this is
Wow.
nothing. This is just an experience, kind of thing. So when you have that different perspective, it does help, but it doesn't. But even after that experience, I still have to get through the fears. They are that is a part of the dualistic density, is to learn how to transcend those.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Wow. This is such a fascinating conversation. I'm looking at the time and I can't believe how long we've already been talking, but there is, so I know we need to wrap it up here shortly, but there is one other thing that I'd love to pick your brain about that you touched on, and that is timelines. This idea of, primary timelines or secondary timelines or optimal timelines. Can you speak a little bit more on that? You've touched on it a little bit, but I'd love to hear more about that whole thing.
Sure. Just briefly, timelines are separated into 3 categories for our experience: primary, secondary, tertiary. Tertiary timelines were the ones where all the manipulation and the synthetic activity was occurring, where darkest, densest realities held sway for a while. And those tertiary timelines have been dropping off since 2016, and the final drop off of those experiences happened with the March equinox. Wow. So everybody moved into secondary timelines, which is why things got very weird and very intense for a lot of people, because suddenly the foundation for your reality is gone, is no more. So that's
so
why
you're saying we sort of everyone who's here has sort of up leveled in a sense. Is that what you're suggesting?
Absolutely. And you kind of like pulled the rug out from dark experiences. So that's why there's a bit of flailing going on in that realm, because everyone all of a sudden, divine human creator incarnate is capable of creating realities in a very powerful way. So when you have a bunch of beings or vibrations that are attempting to control your timeline experience, they're just encouraging you to create realities that don't actually exist anymore. So we just took away, with all this timeline work and with the cosmic frequencies, those synthetic, that synthetic activity is no more. So now with the secondary timelines are what most people are experiencing right now. Still a bit of flail, because the primary timelines, or a Christed crystalline timeline of ascension, actually traverses dimensions.
Wow.
So it's not something that's assigned to 3D, 4D, 5D. It's something that you actually ride a primary timeline experience into a higher dimensional or a higher density experience where you don't need the time construct any longer. So the primary Christed timeline started coming fully on with the eclipse this year, which is why so many of the high vibe tribe are just like, oh my gosh, this now presence thing is extremely strong. And this bifurcation happens between secondary and primary timelines. So the primary timeline of ascension are these pathways to the higher experience, very high vibration. As with anything, it's a vibrational match with unconditional love, the desire for expansion of consciousness, a new experience, unity, desire for reunification of source's self is what allows your personal vibration and collective vibrations to match that timeline experience, which oddly enough doesn't really feel like a timeline. That's the key. Is people ask, am I on the primary timeline? I'm like, what's your experience? Are you experiencing absolute presence now, like where you can't really grok past and future anymore? It's like all kind of now. Then you're starting to ride that primary experience, because it does collapse
Interesting.
collapse dimensional experiences so that you can experience something else. But secondary timelines are what most people are experiencing right now. And then we're just kind of shaving off, secondary timelines is not one, there's several. Personal experience, a personal timelines will change throughout the day, moment to moment. However, the collective timelines are vast for combinations of experiences, and that's a secondary timeline. And then what we call like a new earth experience or an ascension experience, where you're actually raising your vibration to match a different reality, a different planetary experience that was already created in 2012. But now we're starting to vibe up into that. And eventually, it's like trains leaving a station in different directions. Eventually, you just won't experience each other anymore.
Right. So for those who are doing the work and are sort of putting their best foot forward, the most diligent students, if you will, what is your sort of best guess or insight into this primary timeline and when it really sort of takes hold and we're all sort of looking around and saying, oh my gosh, where's the world we were born into, because this is different? Do you have an idea, any ideas on that?
Yeah, because the high vibe tribe is starting just this year is starting to have these very intense experiences. It's
sort of like what you were talking about earlier. Or is that examples when you're referencing some of these experiences, or are there other stories you would want to share?
It's the ability to hold that light. Like when I close my eyes and go into a meditation, my what we call the ascension column, which is like the tube within the tube torus of all of your fields, all your dimensional expressions rest like Russian nesting dolls inside of each other, and the core is your heart center. So when you're meditating and you're dropping into that core, what we call the solar cosmic Christed heart center, that center of the center of the center of all of your expressions, that is where pure source consciousness has a spark. That fractal is within the heart center. And when I go into meditation, there is a visible, palpable experience of this pure light frequency vibrating, lighting up the ascension column. You see light, you see visions, you see geometry, but beyond that, it goes into this state of absolute stillness, absolute pure source presence. And the more of us that are doing that, and now collectively we're starting to do that, we're actually anchoring in that pure crystalline unity consciousness into the morphogenetic fields, the collective consciousness on the planet. And that is what not only makes the primary timeline experience available for more people, but by quantum effect, that very high vibration is actually pulling people up into that experience. So the way that it's been laid out by my divine guides, by my team, is that there are people, incarnates within the collective consciousness right now, high vibe tribe, who are anchoring the embodiment of their crystalline consciousness, Christ consciousness, solar cosmic Christ unity, whatever you want to call it. We're anchoring that into the collective consciousness and into the crystalline core of Gaia and all the grid systems that have been built around that, crystalline grid systems, new earth grid systems, so that it seeds that level of consciousness into the planetary vibration and into the collective consciousness. And then we will be able to demonstrate, show humanity what is possible by vibing out of that experience.
Wow.
Which is a very bizarre thing to claim, but it's just that is just the way it's presenting.
Right.
Now, the how that occurs or the why or the when or anything is not on the radar. They have said that this division of worlds, of timelines, is going to be a very palpable, real experience for many on the planet between now, this year, and next July. So whatever is happening there, there's going to be and again, it's simply because two realities that are so incredibly different cannot coexist for very long, side by side. So if you get people who are, just heaven bent on destroying things, just really want to control consciousness and manipulate things and all that dark stuff, it cannot exist in the same planetary realm, in the same dimension, as a consciousness that is completely focused on unconditional love and higher reality. So we can infuse and pull as many people. I've had these visions of pulling thousands, light workers and wayshowers, pulling thousands of beings, of soul groups into this higher reality, by our collective intent. We're like, all willing souls, come.
Right.
Pulling everybody up, hopefully making it a conscious experience, because I don't feel that anyone should be robbed of their ascension experience or the mastery experience. But, if push comes to shove and it's time to go, I'm taking as many people as possible. Exactly. Anybody who's willing, come on board, that kind of thing.
So would you say, real quick, would you say so there's, okay, it's almost like ships passing in the night. So if I'm sitting here with someone and let's say I'm resonating with love and light and all these beautiful visions of humanity and myself and my brothers and sisters and, and I'm in the same space with someone, right? Physical space. Yeah. And then 10 years from now, I've been on that sort of vibrational train. That person that I was sitting down with 10 years ago has been on a totally different path of, anger and darkness and things like that. Mm-hmm. Do you feel like they'll enter into a world where there's a version of me there still, but the version, let's say, I should have used years. Let's say in 2010, I sat down with someone and I was on one wavelength, they were on another. Now we're at 2020. That person, maybe a version of them is in my primary timeline, let's say, and maybe a version of myself is in some other place with that person I was sitting down before. That's dark. Does that make sense? Do you follow what I'm kind of asking? Is it?
Yes, and it's very potent that you mentioned that, because similar to what happened on the mountain with people seeing me, but I wasn't really there. Right. There's also been this thing presenting, because I belong to these different councils of light that kind of have the architecturals for like how ascension can unfold. And what I bring to the table is the experiences, as somebody who's incarnate, the experiences and going, what if we did this and everything? Because to have a bunch of people disappear out of the collective reality creates such a strange vibration. Like when you feel into it and you see like that particular timeline experience, because it was created that way. There is that timeline that exists where people just phase out of your reality. Mm-hmm. That's where all the biblical stuff came from, because they were looking at that timeline where it's like, you go there, they go there, and we're done, Right. And now that we're getting into, now that we have voice and are going through this experience, there's also this act of compassion on the table that allows you to continue to project into the reality, but technically you're not there because it's all holographic anyway. Mm-hmm. And I feel like we're getting a little taste of this with people seeing me when I'm not really there, or, even the dream state interaction. My students are like, you're there all the time. Right. And I'm like, okay, we're all over the place anyway. We are multidimensional beings. So it makes sense that we would be able to continue to assist. And honestly, the experience that I'm having this year, it feels like that already happened. Mm-hmm. It feels like I left in 2015. I had this very strong experience this one night, April 26, 2015. Will not forget it. Suddenly the journey was done.
Wow! And
I left my body. I went up to the gates on Shasta, and I was like, I wonder if I can get back in my body. That felt like final, And since that moment, it has not felt the same. It's felt like I'm just projecting into this reality, but technically I'm not really here.
Wow.
It's a very bizarre experience, but I feel like perhaps that is this experimentation with, well, let's not freak people out.
Right.
But when you talk about like, 10, can I project for 10 years, on somebody else's behalf, or continue to be that beacon
or another version of myself
that you are.
Let's say there's a version, there's multiple versions of this character, Brandon Beecham, from this moment forward. And maybe there's one that there's the greatest and grandest version. There's everything in between. So maybe there could be a version that ends up in a timeline where everything goes to shit, where, the whole apocalyptic, vision, as well as the version that is in the utopian new earth. Right. And maybe everything in between. That's something that sort of makes sense on some level for me. So when I'm sitting down at any given moment, where I'm at and where you're at, 10 years from now, you may end up with another version of Brandon than you're sitting with right here. And this one ended up one place, and you know what I mean? As depending on how we sort of resonate and create moving forward.
Yeah, there is some pliability, but honestly, the cosmic factors, the galactic factors, the solar factors that are in the ascension timelines, or just the timelines for Gaia herself, would not allow you as a higher being of light to experience an apocalyptic type experience. Your vibration's too high.
Not a match. Yeah. Well,
you're just not a match for that reality. It's just not going to happen, because on a soul level, you've made that choice.
Right.
You're like, no, what am I going to do? Because you can play both sides of the fence for a while, but prior to this incarnation, if you incarnate during the shift in consciousness, you've already made a choice prior to stepping in as to which experience you're going to go into, which is why as people awaken faster and faster, and we're able to pull people into that primary experience of divine love. They just get it. It's just, that's why it's getting that's the quickening that's happening. Even Terrence used to talk about events happening faster and faster. That's what the acceleration of time was like rapid growth in a shorter and a apparently shorter period of time, more events happening closer together. Right. So that's the acceleration that we're experiencing. And the same applies to awakening and ascension. People just flow right into it, because as the collective vibration increases, that primary timeline is going to take as many willing souls as possible. Right. And all the soul groups and all the extended, you don't have to worry. My brother didn't wake up. My sister didn't wake up, whatever. You're kind of doing the work on behalf of many people. We are a fractalized beingness, but as we reconnect the fractals, it's beautiful.
What a beautiful concept that is too, right?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. It's so brilliant. When I look at the ascension and what's happening here, it's just so brilliant. I have nothing but utmost admiration for Source.
Admiration and awe. And speaking of, one of the things that you do, and you touched on a little bit at the very top of the show, is you actually have a very robust ascension path class. I know I haven't been through it, but our mutual friend Matt told me as he was going through it that it just blew him away, and he absolutely loved it. And he's someone who goes through all sorts of every class he can, and he can kind of get his hands, his heart, and head are wrapped around. And he absolutely raved about your Ascension Path class. So you, what I would love for you to do is maybe just take the last few minutes here and tell us a little bit about that. And then I'll explain to the listeners how you have graciously offered sort of a special deal for the P-heads, as I affectionately call them, if they're interested and feel called to, what it is that you're doing.
Sure. Well, Ascension Path was created because there is a somewhat linear progression to the steps of ascension. And all the mystery schools and the initiations and everything of the past were applicable to those older realities. But here we are in this modern age. But there were certain steps that were laid out for us to go through. And you can't skip step 3 and go back to step 1 or whatever, but they built upon each other. So I was guided in 2012 to create Ascension Path, and it is that guidance. You start with the choice, you get into what the body consciousness is all about and the changes that it's going through, the changes in the energy fields, how to clear your emotions, how to clear your fears, all the lower constructs, retraining the mind and the brain and the energy fields, and getting into the heart, and then going into the more galactic things that are part of my own personal path, and telepathic communication and meditation and transforming realities and your personal realities and going into service. All of that is laid out in this Ascension Path training that I've created. And it was a precognitive endeavor. So even though the base of it was created in 2012, it's intended to be applicable for the entire ascension process. And I have upgraded and updated a lot of the meditations and tweaked it here and there over the years. But it's solid. It's transformational. It changes people's lives. If there's anything that I would be most proud of in my journey, and it's not even pride, it's humility, that I was capable of even bringing forth that information in a way that applies to so many different life streams. No matter where people are in the awakening process, they dive in and they can get what they're looking for out of it. And I'll tell you, if ascension is on your heart, and if you've been even ascension curious, it doesn't have to be this full-blown transcending the physical, although it can lead to that if your heart is set on that. But it can change your life. It's about freedom and self-empowerment and self-realization and enlightenment, if you want to call it that. But at this point, it is truly about taking your power as a divine human incarnate and demonstrating that in your own life stream, really getting what you wanted out of this incarnation and out of the shift in consciousness.
Right.
And it's all heart-based. It's a patient, compassionate creation. And you get a whole year to interact with the class.
Yeah, how does that work?
Engage with it.
How does that work as far as the format and
videos
how? Okay, gotcha.
Yeah, it's all stored online, so you work at your own pace. It's video instruction. There's 33 different modules and meditations and PDFs and instruction and support, and 3 years of Q&A calls. If you want to listen to what other brothers and sisters were having trouble with, they're all listed by category now.
Wow.
So it's a really comprehensive way of approaching a complete change in your vibration and your lifestyle. But it's done in a very grounded way, and you work through it at your own pace. So it's always there. It's always available to you.
Wonderful.
You get a whole year of access, because some people fly through the process. Other people, they got emotional stuff they got to work through, or detoxifying so that they can actually open up their vision. They'll linger there for a month or so, and it's laid out that way so that you can take your time. So you're not going to get just plowed over by the process.
Right.
And it does change your life. So you got to be ready for it too.
Wow.
If you've drawn that line in the sand, like, I've had enough. I want to know what's going on the other side of that
I need
wall,
a break between this class and the next one. Let me just integrate here for a minute, because that's a great point. I mean, everyone has different strengths and weaknesses, or things that, one class may be a breeze for one person, and for another, that's the one where they really need the most work, right? So that makes total sense. We're all so unique. So I wasn't sure if it was that way, but I'm glad to hear that it is, because I feel like that is is sort of optimal. And with today's technology and way of setting up a schooling process, it makes the most sense to me. And of course, you being gracious enough to offer a pretty significant discount to Positive Head listeners. So guys, the class is normally $444. What do you know? The angelic frequency, right? And Sandra has offered, been gracious enough to knock off $111. So it would be $333. You said it's 33 modules.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a lot of material. I understand it's a lot of material, but you get a whole year.
Yeah.
Even with the discount, you get full access to everything.
Wow.
And you work at your own pace.
Wow.
So if it's something that, you might start and then you're like, spent a long time on healing my family wounds.
Yeah.
It's fine.
Yeah.
It's fine because it does have a natural progression. So, don't just plow through it. It all ends well.
Right.
It ends in a very good place. It's just you take your time. Yeah.
Well, that's wonderful. So yeah, guys, $444 normally. It's only $333 for P heads if you go to positivehead.com/ascension, ASCENSION for any of you who are didn't win the spelling bee. Hey, sometimes when you're interacting on other dimensions, who's got time for spelling and reading, writing arithmetic? And this is the class for you anyway, because who needs Harvard when you've got Ascension Path class? And Sandra, you obviously, it's one of those things, getting to talk to a lot of amazing people on the show and guests on the show. And of course, with it being audio, not even getting to see people all the time, you really get a feel for their energy just hearing their voice, just talking to them. And I got to say, your energy is amazing. It feels amazing to interact with you. I feel like I could sit here and talk to you for another, hour and a half. And but maybe we'll have to have you back sometime, and maybe we can talk more and revisit and explore other topics, because just everything that's coming out of your mouth, I can feel it, not just coming out of your mouth, but also from your heart. And I just thank you for taking the time and honor the work that you're doing and acting as a gatekeeper and as a guide for so many people that are ready for this information. And God knows we all need some guidance from time to time. So I just want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for what you do. It's absolutely amazing, and your story is amazing.
Oh, thank you so much, Brandon. It's been beautiful to connect with you. And likewise, your vibration is beautiful. And, just to remind everyone, we place the last piece of this puzzle together. It's all about unity and honoring the uniqueness of all these beautiful fractals of source that are reconnecting. So love, love, love everything that's presenting right now. That'll be the key to sailing through this as smoothly with ease and grace.
I fully agree. I do have one last question. As I told you, I'm awfully predictable with my first question. Is always the same. The elevator. The last question is, in 60 seconds or less, what is the meaning of life according to Sandra Walter?
Absolute divine love.
With 59 seconds left that you don't even need to spend because you've said it all. Sandra, thank you so much. You are amazing once again. And until our paths cross in 3D, hopefully, or beyond, journey well.
Oh, blessings to you, dear brother. Thank you.
Blessings to you as well. So once again, guys, if you are interested and feel called to participate in Sandra's wonderful, comprehensive online training in multidimensional consciousness, Ascension Path, just go to positivehead.com/ascension. You're going to receive $111 off the course. And also, this is only going to this discount is only going to last through January of 2018. So come February, if you guys are hearing this after that fact, my apologies, but that discount won't be there any longer. So you do have, as of the time of recording this, you have a couple months to take advantage of this gracious offer that Sandra has put out to all you P-heads.